Hello, this is Tony Brewer from the We Talk Truth Group, and you're listening to Cogitations. If you're watching this live, you're watching it on the Added to the Church of Christ Acts 247 Facebook page. And if you're listening to this if you're listening to this after the fact, you're listening to it either as an archive on the Added page, or you are listening to Podbean or Apple Podcast. And we're so thankful for those who tune in and watch us there. For this episode, I'm going to talk about adultery and divorce. And a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about this idea of adultery. In the We Talk Truth group, I saw a thread that had some questions, and I just saw a lot of misconceptions about the whole deal. Here's the thing. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to think about it. Daniel chapter 7, verse 28, Daniel writes, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me. But I kept the matter in my heart." We're not going to keep the matter in our heart. We are going to talk about it. We're going to hash it out. We're going to scrutinize the truth. And for what we're going to do, before I take any comments or anything, I'm going to go to Matthew, and we're going to look at the words of Jesus, chapter 5. Verse 30, not Matthew 5:32. That's a good one. We're going to go there. But right here, Matthew 5:27. "Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and if it cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell," so on and so forth. Now, can we surmise what it takes to commit adultery from this verse? I think the misconception is that we think that fornication and adultery are one and the self same act, and it is not the case that is true. I have talked to some people who swear up and down that the only way that a married man can commit adultery is if he also commits fornication. Fornication, Matthew 19:9. "Whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and marrieth another, committeth adultery, and whoso marrieth her that hath been put away doth also commit adultery." You go on down in the context here. Matthew 5:31, "It hath been said, Whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writ of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, committeth adultery." The word adultery there is used. Fornication is different from adultery. Fornication and adultery are two different things. Just because that I, as a married man, if I commit fornication, that I am also committing adultery, doesn't mean that the only way that I can commit adultery is if I fornicate. Fornication, let's look this up. I'm going to use eSword. I'm going to use Strong's and Thayer's, but I urge you to do some deep research on this. I've done the deep research on this. I have studied this verse. I have studied this word, fornication and adultery, about as much as it can be studied. Where is it at? Fornication, porneia. It's harlotry. And the reason why it's called harlotry is there's the stem word, which let me see if I can find it here. Of course, I'm not going to be able to do that. Let me do this. This is we're going to go to Strong's. We're going to go to G. The Strong number is G 4202. All right. Well, of course, G420. You got to type it in correctly. All right. It's from G4203, which is to act the harlot, literally to indulge in sex. It's to the practice of sex. Thayer is porneo, which is to prostitute one's body, to give oneself to unlawful sexual intercourse. It's metaphorically to be given to idolatry, so on and so forth. And if you go farther than that, the Greek word for a whore, either a male or a female, is that stem word. It's a porne, and then there's a female and a male ending. But the idea is it's fornication is stuff you would do with a whore. Okay, it's sexual intercourse. Just because they're mentioned here in the same context, adultery and fornication, I can commit fornication while not also committing I can commit adultery while not also committing fornication. All right. The problem that I hear, the thing that I hear people say, especially my brethren, is they'll say, well, the only reason that you can marry or that you can divorce and scripturally remarry is if your spouse commits adultery. That is wrong. According to Matthew 5:28, which is what we read, but I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. This person committed adultery, and he committed it in his heart. But it's still adultery. It's still considered adultery. So if you catch somebody looking at pornography, they're committing adultery because they're looking upon a woman for the purpose of lusting. But that's not fornication. Jesus was very specific. He said, whosoever marrieth her that hath been put away, my phone is trying to talk to me. Jesus said, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication. Fornication and adultery are two different things. I cannot stress that enough. I can commit adultery without also committing fornication. I don't know if y'all can hear. I hope y'all can hear. I'm getting some, I've got 16 folks in, so I'm assuming that I wouldn't have this many people in here if y'all couldn't hear. My Mevo camera is down. So anyway, that's why I'm looking like this. And that's why I didn't go live this morning. I was having trouble with my Mevo camera. Now let me get in here and see if I can see any questions or comments. I hate that this is taking so long. All right, come on. Everything goes slow when you're trying to wait on it. All right, good deal. All right, so I just see the folks in. I don't see any particular questions. So the problem is, and this is what I've been told, and I actually had somebody fight me on this so hard that they actually affirmed that Jesus was conceived after Mary and Joseph were married. But the fella actually said, so if you're saying that adultery and fornication are not the same thing, then you're saying that God committed adultery whenever he impregnated Mary. And I'm like, no, because Mary wasn't married to Joseph. And I promise you, I've got a screenshot of it. This guy said, well, how can you put somebody away if you're not married? Listen to it. Now, the birth of Jesus Christ was on this wise. When as his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost. Now, Joseph, her husband, being a just man and not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privily. Listen, I have never seen people get so illogical than they have about a topic like this or about this topic. Adultery, according to the BDAG, the Brown Drivers Aren't and Griggs or whatever, the foremost lexical authority list the Greek word for adultery, and you've got to be careful, because if all you do is have a beta version, now listen to this, Matthew 5:28 has the term for adultery. And it's the same term that Jesus uses in Matthew 5, 27, 28. Let's see. Let's go to Matthew 19, 9. I want to make sure. Matthew 19. Let's go down there to Matthew 19, 9. This adultery. Yep, same word. Exact same word. Same word as 532 is in Matthew 19, 9. Now listen, here's the definition of a beta of a watered down lexicon. Strong says to commit adultery. Strong's defines the term using the term. Okay. Thayer only gives one definition of the many that their full lexicon gives. It says to have unlawful intercourse with another's wife, to commit adultery with. Well, the problem there is that's not the term. That's not what the word means in its totality. The BDAG, which is now you got to get the full version of this lexicon. You got to really do this studying. The BDAG, I think it's this definition number 4, definition number 5, that defines this word for adultery as unfaithfulness to one's spouse. And it cites Matthew 5:28. If I look at a woman for the purpose of lusting, I have committed adultery with her. I've committed adultery with that woman. Now, that doesn't mean that my wife can put me away and then have a cause and have a spiritual right to remarry. And in fact, the people that get so crazy with this, the ones that say, well, what you're saying is you're cheapening God's law of marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and you're making it looser than what it is. No, I'm not. Actually, if we think that adultery is the only reason for marriage, divorce, and remarriage, not only are we cheapening what the Bible says and we're lessening the power of the words of Jesus, we're changing the words of Jesus. Jesus said that whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for porneia, fornication, committeth adultery. He said that for a purpose. I do not, as a married man, have to have sex in order to commit adultery. But in order to commit adultery where my wife is able to put me away with the ability to remarry, I do have to commit the sexual act, fornication. Now, I talked to a man that was just dead set saying that, oh, by the way, the guy that said Jesus and Jesus was conceived whenever Joseph and Mary was married, he had such a problem with this that he was so angry he couldn't even discuss it. And he ended up saying that he ended up affirming that Jesus was conceived after Joseph and Mary came together, not before, which go read Matthew 1:25 or 18 through 25. It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, the people that affirm that adultery and fornication must be one and the self same act, they don't really believe that. They don't understand what they're affirming. Here it is. If I put my wife away and then I marry a woman, let's say I put my wife away for burning the toast, and then I marry a woman and I have no right to be married to her, I don't have to have sex with her to commit adultery. Here's what happens. I'm going to go to the chapel. We're going to go before the justice of the peace, and the wedding officiant is going to say, blah, 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 repeat after me, and I'm going to say I do, and then she's going to say I do. Then he's going to say, I now pronounce you man and wife. I've never had sex with her, but I'm committing adultery. You do not. So the people that are so adamant saying, well, adultery is fornication, and fornication, in order to commit adultery, you must commit fornication. Right there is a situation in which I do not have to commit fornication and in order to commit adultery. Marrying a woman I have no right to be married to is adulterous. It's adultery. Okay? We need to understand the importance of this and the teaching of it. adultery is a violation of the bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh contract between God, the woman, and the man. There are certain things that are given to a husband and a wife. Procreation is one of those. If you're a man and a wife and you decide to have babies and you decide to procreate and you bring a third party into it, you're adulterating your marriage, because procreation is given to a husband and a wife. If you're a husband and a wife and you decide to bring a woman into a bedroom, a third party into the bedroom, usually it's a woman, but it could be a man. You decide to bring a third party into it, even if it's permissive, even if it's, even if both of you decide to do it, it's adulterating your marriage. Not only is it fornication, but it's also adultery. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. There's a triangle. You've got God, and then you've got the husband and the wife. Procreation is given to the husband and the wife. Sexual desire. A man is supposed to be sexually desirous of his wife, and a wife is supposed to be sexually desirous of her husband, and to foster that with any other person is adultery. I cannot, as a man, look upon a woman for the purpose of lusting. That is committing adultery. Now, but it is not committing fornication. So therefore, my wife cannot put me away with the ability to remarry. If, let's see, if I go outside of the marriage seeking something that I am supposed to only receive from my wife, that is adultery. Adultery, according to the BDAG, brown drivers aren't, and I think it's Griggs. Y'all check me on that. I can't remember. Well, I tell you what, I don't know why I'll just check it real quick. BDAG lexicon, also known as the, hold on. Yep, what does BDAG stand for? That's a good one. Not Brown, Bauer. I knew I had one of them wrong. Bauer, Danker, Arndt, and Griggs. Not driver. Oh, I know why I was putting driver in there. Because of the Hebrew lexicon on eSword. Oh well. I do stuff to let you know that I am not inspired all the time. So there's one of them. So the Bauer, Danker, Arndt, and Gingrich. From here on out for this podcast, it's going to be called the BDAG. I'm surprised I don't have any more comments on this thing than I do. I figured I'd be ruffling people's feathers with this one. Maybe it just makes so much sense to you. I don't know. But where was I at? Oh, yeah. So adultery, according to the BDAG, is anything from unlawful sexual intercourse with a person that's not your spouse, excuse me, to unfaithfulness to one's spouse. And again, go to Matthew 5:28. It's defined in that way there. Here's an example of a man that commits adultery but doesn't also commit fornication. I don't know how long I've been going here, but it's pretty much done. There's no reason for us to have any confusion whatsoever on this topic. That's it. Adultery is not fornication. Fornication is not adultery. That's two separate things. I can commit adultery and not commit fornication. I can commit fornication and not commit adultery. If I am single, I can commit fornication and not commit adultery. If I am married, I can commit adultery without committing fornication. But if I fornicate, then I am also committing adultery. We need to get this straight in our minds if we're going to teach where the Bible teaches, and we're going to speak where the Bible speaks, and be silent where the Bible's silent. Do Bible things in Bible ways, all that good stuff. So, I don't know. I don't understand what the problem is here. Again, there's a scenario in which a person can commit adultery and for sure not have ever fornicated. And that's if a person puts away his spouse and then marries another before they fornicate. I hope this has been interesting to you. If you have any questions about this, I urge you, come into the We Talk Truth group and post these questions. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss it. I mean, these things are stuff that we need to talk about. And a lot of times in the local congregation, it's taboo. Oh, we don't want to talk about that. We're in mixed company. Look, we're grown folk. We need to talk about this thing. We need to talk about this stuff. If we don't, we're just going to perpetuate a false idea, and we're going to have a bunch of people running around saying, well, the only reason for marriage, divorce, and remarriage is adultery. No, that is not true. And incidentally, this is the main reason I do not like the modern versions, is because they are not clear on this topic. They are not clear on this issue. The modern versions watered down what Jesus is saying. Let me give you an example. The English Standard Version that my brethren just absolutely love. And I say unto you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. Let's go to Matthew 5:32. But I say unto you that everyone who divorces his wife except on the ground of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery, and whosoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Sexual immorality, what's that? Well, if my wife reads 50 Shades of Grey, that is sexually immoral. So that means I can divorce her and I can marry another, and I'll be fine. Folks, if you'll allow me to appropriate the language of my brother James, these things ought not so to be. You got me? That ain't the way it ought to be. If you're going to use these modern versions, understand that is not good. Sexual immorality is anything immoral that has to do with sex. All right? Jesus said fornication, which is the sexual act. These modern versions water it down. And incidentally, I don't want to spend hour after hour after hour studying with somebody, telling them, don't listen to your pastor, only listen to the words of the Bible. And then come to find out they don't have a right to be married to their husband because their husband was put away from his first wife because of watching pornography, which is not fornication, but it is adultery. So they say, see, I'm fine. Then you have to say, well, no, you're not fine. Don't listen to the words of the Bible. Listen to the words of me. You got me? I don't want to ever have to do that. That's why I do the King James, because the King James says fornication. I wonder if Young's literal translation is it's not difficult. Come on. Can't find it. There it is. Young's literal translation. But I say to you that whosoever may put away his wife, save for the matter of whoredom. That's a good translation. Whoredom. That's a good translation. I'm going to see what they say in 199, Matthew 19:9. Yep, says whoredom. So Young's literal translation does good, but you wouldn't want to read the Young's literal translation very much. The ASV 1901 translates it fornication. But other than that, even the New King James misses it here. And if you're going to use one of these new translations, just understand that's one of the holes that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to eventually deal with someone. You're going to have to deal with someone that on the modern translation that you have to say, listen, this is a modern translation, but the word is fornication. And you might even say, look, don't listen to me. Look at the words of the Bible. And then get you a King James version and say, listen, this is the way it was translated. But of course, it seems like it would instill a mistrust of our English translation when you're studying people. This fella says you may ruffle some feathers, but this is a topic that many shy away from. Well, I appreciate that much. I appreciate that very much. One sister says the 1901 American Standard used fornication. Yes, it does. The NASB, the ESV, I don't believe any new translation after about 1950 uses fornication. Anyway, that's just, you just be aware of it. Be aware of it and understand fornication is what you would do with a prostitute. It's got to be skin on skin involving genitalia, and it's got to be it's not adultery. Rather, excuse me. It's what I say when I mean when I say it's not adultery. Fornication is fornication, and if a married person commits fornication, that is adultery. All right, but a married person can commit adultery when it's not also fornication. We have got to get that through our heads. If we don't get that through our heads, we're not going to teach the issue of marriage, divorce, and remarriage correctly. Okay. Anyway, this is what I've got here. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can go to Instagram at nearchurches.com on Instagram, and I try to make 1 or 2 posts there per day. Go to Cogitations podcast YouTube channel, and you can also catch The Mindful Soul, which is mine and LeBeth's new podcast. And we will eventually have a podcast uploaded on Podbean for a standalone for that podcast itself. You can go to cogitations.podbean.com and please subscribe, or go to Apple Podcast and look Cogitations up. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. It helps promote the content. The We Talk Truth podcast, you can go to Apple Podcast or wetalktruth.com on Podbean and subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating. And then if you want to help us do what we do, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com/nearchurches. Thank you so much for the words of encouragement to everybody. Yes, these newer versions do water it down. Thank you. And Lord willing, I'll be back at my regular time, and I hope to get my Mevo camera fixed. God bless you, and we'll see you on the flip side.